Give it just a couple seconds here. All right, the live feed is up. We are ready to go. Carrie, if you want to start,
Sure.
why don't you go ahead?
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year, and welcome to the first RIMSL meeting. We're so excited that you can join us, whether you're at RIMSL, as I see Julie and Chad are, or whether you're joining us virtually, as some of the other board members are this morning. We're just happy you're here. The purpose of today's meeting is to onboard some of our new board members and give you an overview of RIMSL and get some updates from Chad, and then we will meet in our regularly scheduled meeting on January 25th. So, Chad and I talked yesterday, and we thought a fun way to introduce ourselves to each other and to the wider audience is to tell us a little bit about what's appealing to you about expeditionary learning. So, maybe Chad and Julie, you can think about why you're at RIMSL and not somewhere else. And for the rest of us, you can just think about what's enticing about expeditionary learning and share a short story about a trip that changed you, or a trip where you really felt like you learned something. So Chad and I have had a chance to prepare, so we'll give you some think time, and I'll go first, and then I'll turn it over to Chad. And Julie, we're going to call on you too, so don't think you're going to get out of this. But so introduce yourselves, say which district you represent, and maybe what's enticing to you about serving on a board of expeditionary learning, and then a memorable travel experience. So my name is Carrie Olson, and I serve on the Denver Public Schools Board of Education, and I represent District 3, which is just a little bit north of RIMSL and central Denver. And I am really excited to work, and have been to work with Chad and the entire RIMSL community over these last, I don't know, I guess it's almost 3 years, because my dissertation is based on expeditionary learning and the meaning of educational travel for students ages 12 to 18. And so this has always been a passion of mine. And as I was thinking in preparation for this, a trip that changed me, I can think of many, canoeing in the Boundary Waters and traveling with all my students. But I think my first real trip that changed me was when I went to Spain in 1977 with a group of people from northern Minnesota. I grew up in a really small town, so we combined with a bunch of students from that Arrowhead portion of northern Minnesota, and we went to Spain. And I had never been on a plane before. Planes scared me, but I really wanted to travel to Spain. And I remember just being in awe of a whole other country that spoke an entirely different language that I was learning and not very good at it. And I came back and I knew that I wanted to continue to learn Spanish. And from there, that just developed a lifetime of travel. I went back to Spain many times, and when I started teaching, I knew I wanted to get students involved in travel, so I did 37 trips over 25 years, I think, with 800 students to Washington, D.C. and Europe. So my passion is always in working with students and travel. I took kids to Ballarat in Denver Public Schools for third and fifth grade. So always liking to get outside of the classroom. I was always known as the field trip teacher when I was a teacher, even before I started getting kids on planes. Everybody was like, how do we get to the public library? Let's ask Carrie. How do we get to Boulder? Let's ask Carrie. So Chad, I'll flip it over to you, and then we'll go on down the line.
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that. I've been here now. This is my 11th year. And I think the most unique thing about this community is seeing our kids that stay for the duration of their K-12 experience and the relationships we get to build with them. And so one of the most unique and special things at REMSL is our culminating graduation, where each of our high school crew leaders speaks about each child for 5 minutes with a individually prepared speech. And just hearing all those memories, seeing all the success of those students, seeing the diversity that we have where students go out into the world and do unique and different things. Kids go to the School of Mines and they become petroleum engineers. And kids also take off to Alaska to serve in the community as fishing boat captains and wildland firefighters. And the most second most unique window at REMSL is the week prior to winter break, when all of those college students or students in the workforce start to migrate back to our parking lot. You see them at lunchtime. You see them try to sneak through the doors. Leslie tells them we're on COVID protocols and they can't just walk up to the classroom. but they have an affinity with this place and the way that it has impacted them in a positive way, the way that it's changed them. They come back and tell their stories. A family of 8 children that went through the REMSL program. All students have graduated at this time. One of them stopped by. Her sister's now a kindergarten EL teacher in Durango. And so hearing just those stories and getting to have that longevity of relationships with kids is amazing. For favorite REMSL trip, I'll go with we had a first grade trip in 2018. We had a blizzard. We had to cancel the first day. And as many of you may know, with young kids, taking 6-year-olds out away from the home is extremely challenging. And we call it 72 hours of the first 48. We're going to have a lot of tears. We're going to stay up late. We're going to hand out some stuffies. We're going to make sure kids are okay. And then on the next day, they fall asleep standing up at like 4 o'clock. And so this particular group of kids, we were able to rally the next day. We drove up outside of Golden. We had 2 feet of snow, and those kids played in 2 feet of snow and had the most magical day ever. And literally the phrase of falling asleep standing up, about 5:30 in the supper line, they were literally falling over, falling asleep. And it was just magical to see that experience for our youngest kids. It's so neat when our oldest kids go out and serve in communities. They go to Native communities and give back through service. They learn about different aspects of our history and our culture. But it's always fun with our kindergarten and first grade students, and it's always fun for our kindergarten and first grade students' parents to go through that first 72 hours of their child being away from home. So those are a couple of the things that I love about this place. Probably favorite trip experience was that first grade trip. And I look forward to exciting things we have going on now. We operated our full trip program this year safely outdoors. It adds so much social, emotional wellness and health for our kids. It gives them something to look forward to. It gives them goals. We're learning about water rights in the Western United States as connected to climate change in our 7th and 8th grade classes. And we're going to do a 4-day, 3-night expedition style trip out of Grand Junction into Westwater with our students on rafts to really put them and immerse them in the place that they're going to be learning about for this semester. So good stuff happening here at REMSL, exciting things. And so, all right, Julie, mother of 2 former REMSL students and trip attendee.
I've been here for a while. One of the first trips that I remember was the trip that Chad's talking about. As kindergartners, both my girls were here K through 8. As kindergartners, I would look out the window, and we used to have them work on setting up tents outside so that you get 5-year-olds out there trying to work together as a group to put up the tents. I let my husband go on that first trip because I didn't want those 72 hours. And I went on the trip at the end of the first grade, which was a rafting trip. And to watch the change in those kids, from the kids out here who were crying that they couldn't put up the tent, to being leaders for their little group. I mean, it was great. During that same time period, we had a teacher here who he was in the K1 loop, and he was teaching about the river, was his expedition. And we, at this point, this is before kids, at this point, we didn't have kids. But Peter was his name. Peter went and got big fish from the grocery store, and they dissected those fish so you could see what the insides looked like. And they did this over a period of like 3 days in May when it was very hot. And we, at the same time, were having a site seminar here in the school. And Peter would wrap those fish up at the end of the day and stick them in the cooler. By the 3rd day, when that site seminar was going on and heat in this building, oh God, you walked in the building and it just stunk of fish. What was neat about that expedition, though, Peter, what they did to show like the life cycles, he went out to the neighborhood garden here and they buried the fish. So after about 3 or 4 days, the kids wanted to know what was happening to those fish underground, because nobody talks about that piece of it. So they went out and they dug up the fish to look at the fish and learn about worms and all that kind of thing. So it's everything here is kind of connected, and that's, I think, what I really like about the school. So it's probably why I stayed so long.
Thank you, Julie and Chad. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts. And do I have a volunteer to go next, or I could go in alphabetical order? All right, Brianna.
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Mestas, the director of DEI at PEBC. And so what drew me to just Remsel and expeditionary learning, I was actually a classroom teacher for 7 years. And I started out my residency year, my first year teaching, I was at an expeditionary learning school. And one of the things that I absolutely loved about the model was just this, from an academic perspective, just this like holistic cross-curricular approach where you could be, focusing on science, but you're also building in literacy, and you have like you're building in a social studies component to it. Like I just think there's so much flexibility, and it provides students with this like broader lens to see the world. I also think it's really powerful to have a land-based approach, right? And a place-based approach in terms of learning. One of my favorite places that I've traveled. So the last 2 years I was in the classroom, I taught in Panama City at an international school. And it's a gorgeous country, gorgeous people. And my favorite place to visit there was the Gunayala. It's a comarca indígena. So this is autonomous indigenous territory. And it's formerly known as San Blas Islands. And it was just gorgeous. So it was like clear waters, it's like all of these islands. This is where I learned how to paddleboard. And I loved being outside. It was so peaceful and incredible. And it's a place that I've often thought about and one that I'd like to go and visit again. So that's mine.
Thank you, Brianna. Anybody want to go next? Don't be shy. Angela? And then we'll go to Angela and then David and then Scott. Thank you.
I'm Angela Christensen, and I serve on the Littleton Public Schools Board of Education. And this is starting my second year. I was appointed last year in February and then was elected in November for another term. And I have twin boys who are sophomores in Littleton. And what attracts me to Rumsel is that I guess just that you guys understand that all kids learn differently, and that, a traditional approach is not the best for everyone, and that we have those opportunities and options for kids. So that's what attracts me. And as far as trips, due to my husband's job, he works a classified job. We have a long list of international travel that we cannot do. And so when our boys were very young, we decided that we wanted them to see all 50 states before they turned 18. And we are down to just the last couple. They are almost 16 now, but we just have a few left. I've been to all 50, but we don't count it until all 4 of us have been there together. So we are working towards that, but it's just, I love that we can experience, there are certain states, and I won't name which ones, but that, you don't think of that's a vacation hotspot. But we have found something exciting in every single state, and we try to do things that either locals would do, or we try not to do anything touristy, I guess. So we try to find local things, local attractions. We love the outdoors. And so those are our favorite trips. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. That's pretty impressive, all 50 states. I don't think I've done that yet. David?
Good morning, everyone. I'm from Douglas County School District, still serving kind of as a backup, if you will. I came on this morning because I wasn't sure if Becky Myers has gotten her feet on the ground yet to be your representative from Douglas County, but I have always been intrigued by expeditionary learning. I guess, gosh, I hate to even count the years, but probably over 30 years ago, I had an outward bound experience where all administrators for Douglas County actually were engaged in an outward bound experience, mostly high ropes, low ropes kind of activities. And so I think that really began to spark my intrigue with what out of the walls of the classroom can provide for kids. Then later in life, after I tried to retire, my first attempt, I came back and helped open up the Outdoor Ed Center for the school district, and actually became trained in doing a lot of the activities that we typically think of with outward bound and outdoor education. So have always had a love and just an amazement for what happens when kids really are challenged beyond what they think are their limitations. And watching that instant victory when you put a child on a zip line for the first time and they conquer it. It's just an adrenaline rush that I don't think I've ever had before as an educator. But I think that's what's intrigued me. As far as trips that changed me, gosh, I think every trip has changed me. So it's hard to kind of narrow it down. I think the first international trip I did was Ireland. And I guess that one came to my mind just because it was really the first time I really understood that there was history beyond 200 years in the United States, and to be able to actually walk, up through castles that were built BC and actually touch artifacts like that just blew my mind. And I've never been one that really has appreciated history. And so I think since then, it really has changed my perspective about how important history is and how intrigued I am to understand history of things. We went to Italy a couple of years ago and same kind of just awestruck in terms of that country as well. So I guess those are a couple of trips that really changed my perspective. So thanks.
Thank you. And thanks for coming today. Well, Doug sorts out whether it's Becky or you, or it sounds like it might be Becky, but thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And Scott Balderman is also from Denver Public Schools. The school actually sits in his district, although it's like right on the border. So he's visiting today. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Carrie said my name's Scott Balderman. So I've been on the DPS board now representing Southeast Denver for a little over 2 years. And as Carrie said, here to observe and strategize on how we move forward from the board representative on the Remsel board. I have 2 kids, so DPS, an elementary school daughter. My son goes to middle school in DPS as well. And as far as expeditionary learning goes, this is something that I've always wished I had available to me as a kid. I always remember struggling with reading and having to read things over and over and over again to comprehend the curriculum. But the idea of having something outside of the classroom always seemed fascinating to me. So I always wish that this was something like this was available. A trip that changed me would have to be my trip to Alaska 4 years ago. I think seeing climate action or climate change in real time was very impactful for me. And so I always remember that trip and just coming back home thinking like, wow, this is very different. And seeing everything going on with the glaciers in Alaska is very eye-opening.
Thank you, Scott, and we're glad you could join us today. We also just want to let our viewing audience know that we don't have a representative from Aurora Public Schools just yet, and Angela Gardland from Cherry Creek represents Cherry Creek on the Remsel board, and she wasn't able to join us today. So just to let everybody know, we're short 2 board members this morning, but we'll be sure that we get them caught up. So at this time, we're going, as you all know, you received the BOCES board member handbook, and we just wanted to send that all to you to let you know a little bit of the history of how we've created that, and then offer some time if you have any initial questions, but we'll give you some time to read that and we'll revisit it again at the January meeting. But we wanted to give that to you as that is something that Dan Jorgensen started when he was on the Remsel board, and he started putting everything together based on Colorado Associations of School Boards, neighboring school districts. And then when he went off the Remsel board, Crystal Holtzman from Douglas County and I spent a lot of time revamping it and sort of bringing it up to speed. You'll see it was written pre-pandemic, so there's some things we may even need to switch. I think we were just starting Zoom meetings at the time we finished it up. So, but I think it's in a really good place. But as all handbooks, it's a living document. Chad and I talked yesterday, and we just wanted to make sure that you knew that. None of that is like written in stone. Thank you to Chad and his staff who cleaned it up and made it look really pretty. Looks a lot better than the last version Krista and I had looked at, with lots of redlining and putting things in and comments. But it's just a guide so that you understand how we operate as a board. In a bit, Chad's going to give you an overview of like the history of RIMSL and why we have a BOCES in the middle of the city. But we wanted to just offer this so that you had a chance to look at the board member handbook. And I know that it's also posted for any of our viewing audience who would like to look at it. But we won't dig deep into it now, as there was a lot of reading for today. So if you didn't get to it, we can revisit it at another meeting. But are there any initial questions? Or Chad, before I ask that, actually, I should ask Chad, do you want to add anything else to that? As I know you and your staff put the final touches on it.
The only thing I would say is this document, while tied to a small institution within the city and county of Denver, has a plethora of information and leadership. It's written from a lens of what I would say is modified policy governance, with the structure of operation here at RIMSL, knowing that the organizational structure between the board and our teaching staff here at RIMSL is much more linear than it is in a large metro district, and so kind of defines how we work together with that organizational structure, myself in the role that I serve, the role of the board members, and just want to acknowledge the individuals that invested into this, and that this can be a tool even in your large metro districts, because Dan Jorgensen is a director at the Colorado Department of Education. So he has the lens of education, the lens of board service for 2 terms in Aurora Public Schools. This particular board had 3 Colorado Association of School Board board members on it as well, working on this, with former President Kelly Perez, Dr. Olson, and Director Holtzman. And so this is a really useful, in-depth tool that is a living document. Your Microsoft Word will not recognize the word boardsmanship, but I'm sure you've heard that in your onboarding process, and this really tries to define kind of those working relationships and roles. I think this board, I think the previous board, for really living out the values of that modified policy governance structure, sharing resources from your district when available, and then also allowing me to continue to serve in the role as the single employee of the board making operational decisions. I think it was very effective, especially over the last few years as we navigated the pandemic. So very useful tool. It's all about boardsmanship. It's a word Microsoft Word doesn't recognize, but I think it's a valuable tool. And please redline it, mark it up, ask questions, send them to myself. We also have outside counsel at Kaplan & Ernst that we'll speak to with the IGA negotiations, but very useful tool for onboarding.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that we had said it's sort of modified policy governance. As many of you know, that's typically the way that boards operate. And Denver Public Schools has recently voted in a host of policy governance policies. And thanks to Scott Balderman, who's on this call, who's our policy guru, along with Dr. Richard Charles. So I'll open it up if you have any initial questions or comments from anybody who's on the call, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item. But I just wanted to give you a little framing around that document.
Carrie, thank you so much to you and Krista for updating this. It was really, really helpful and just spelled everything out perfectly. So I appreciate you working on that.
You're welcome. It's good to see that something that took us all these years to get to has been helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo Angela's sentiment as well. I think this is extremely helpful. And as someone who's, at an organization where we're revisiting our onboarding process, I just think that this is an incredible tool. I appreciate that you're naming it's a living document. And something that I'll definitely be leaning on as we progress throughout the year. It's really a playbook for how to engage with one another, and then with the school community as well. So thank you so much for all the time and effort, and everyone who contributed to this.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's teamwork. Huge shout out to former President Kelly Perez for shepherding that work. And then Krista Holtzman from DougCo, and of course Dan, who started it all. So thank you. All right, so we'll come back to that, but just keep looking through it. And as Brianna mentioned again, it's a living document, so we're always open to changes, feedback. Send them on to Chad and maybe myself as the interim chair until we have board elections, and then we can go over it and make sure that we send it through a general council as well. So all of our next agenda items sort of relate to the same thing around how RIMSL operates and sort of like a picture of where we are right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Chad in a minute. And since this is a work session, we're just using first names and we're a little more informal on this board than we are maybe in our bigger district boards where we call everybody by director and our titles. But just because this is a work session, we're informal. And so I'll kick it over to Chad to sort of frame how we're going to talk about all of the next topics and agenda items. And then if you have questions, like feel free to raise your hand and Chad will call on you, but he'll give you some framing and then we'll dive right in. So thank you. So Chad, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, specifically that first name basis piece. Day one here at RIMSL in 2011. You know, when your kindergartner walks up to you and you're no longer Mr. Burns, it's a different, it's an adjustment, but it is part of that design of relationship building and personalness. So, you know, please, no disrespect to board members. If I even slip up on it, I've been called Chad by our kids for the last 11 years. So it's become second nature. Carrie asked a question yesterday, and I appreciate her stepping in to help manage this meeting in the transition between former President Kelly Perez, who served RIMSL for her entire term as a Littleton Public School Board's member. And so she's serving today as that role to help run this meeting, and then we'll speak to officer transitions at our next meeting. So thank you, Carrie, for working with me, helping me through this process and working collaboratively. Our next three items really kind of closely tie together, but we'll try to break them down. Carrie presented me with a question yesterday that I think is the right question. She said, why is there a BOCES located in the heart of central Denver? BOCES are Board of Cooperative Education Services that serve our state of Colorado. Outside of the metro area, Colorado is still much a very rural, very geographically diverse space of schools and districts and services. And so BOCES step into a void to serve as insurance conglomerates, as special education service providers, as professional development collaboration organizations, and it brings together multiple school districts. We are unique in that this was designed 28 years ago, 29 years ago, between these partner school districts and the Public Education and Business Coalition to provide an alternative instructional delivery to students in the metro area across all of our districts. Some say we were the pioneer of school choice in Colorado. And you now have narratives, you know, through what I call with our kids. I talk about doom scrolling. We hear, oh, charters are bad this, or choice is bad there, or neighborhood this, and if you go back to the original inception documents of this place, the heart of why this was created and why it continues to be successful today was about providing that alternative instructional delivery to students. It serves some students and families extremely well, and it doesn't work for other students. And if you ever hear me deliver my open house remarks, I do not position us as an institution, as an organization, as a program that works for everyone. We don't go out and sell this place. We don't go out and compete this place against others. We don't have an advertising and marketing budget. We provide an alternative delivery of instruction that works really well for some children. That was sought in 1993, 1994, because we know that in our big public districts, we were designed around an economy of scale. I worked in the Cherry Creek School District as a middle school math teacher and coordinator, and then I went on to serve in Douglas County as a dean of students and an assistant principal. And, you know, when we opened up Cimarron Middle School, same footprint, same building, same design as all of our other partner Douglas County middle schools. We use that economy of scale to serve kids in 1,000 student plus places. We know that works really well for some kids, and we know that other kids need an option. And so that's what RIMSL is. RIMSL is not a place in a niche, in a market, in a narrative that's trying to compete against one of our districts, compete against a place. It's really designed, or was designed, continues to be designed, to bring together families that are seeking an alternative delivery of instruction to serve their kids. And not to say that it's better served for one age of students across our 13 grade continuum, but you really see the place where it has the heart in our middle school and our high school. You know, kids that get lost in being one of 1,000 high school students versus being one of 25 ninth grade students, knowing that they have a person that they can build relationships, a place where they can be themselves, a place that they can be different. And so I really want to frame that as we go into this negotiation cycle of this document was created in 1993, revised and amended every 5 years to really provide that framework for us to continue to partner and serve these 400 students across our 5 districts and provide that option of choice. It's not an option of better than or worse. It's an option of how do we make sure kids can succeed in our traditional environments and our other choice partners and here at Remsel. I also try to be funny, which I'm not typically very good at, but we talk about an open house when somebody calls and goes, you know, what does your theater program look like at Remsel? Do you guys like have a cinematography arm of what you do? And I was like, nope, but my friends at DSA do. And you should check them out because they do an amazing job with that program. And I said, I bet you won't ask DSA if they'll take your kid on a 2-week backpacking trip to start the school year. And they're like, yeah, absolutely not. So we have a niche, we have a place. We're not a competitor, we're a partner. And so that's kind of the framing of this. I will say or at least in my tenure here, we never kind of had outside eyes look at the organizational structure of this and if it is still the right organizational structure until we went out for private equity bond. And when we went out for private equity bond, we had bond counsel, we had internal counsel, we had a finance consultant that helped us through that process. Moody's came in, brought a team from San Francisco, and they interview staff, they interview us, they interview board members, and they really got to look at this, and they were really trying to find the avenue of like, how does this fit to go out for financial capital? And what they looked at was this probably provides one of the most stable school choice board of educations and design for governance that are out there, because it puts in place a board that is absent or free of bias of being a parent, particularly in the school, much so like a charter school often has. And so Moody's looked at that and said, wow, the organizational stability, structure, longevity of this place is very well served because you have these elected officials that have an expertise in their district, and they come and they serve and represent your board. So even having that outside set of eyes to say, wow, this is, even though this is, nearing 3 decades old, this is an amazing structure for operation and has served this community well. And obviously they're looking at it a lens of, can we pay our bills for the next 30 years? And they felt very strong with that because we did not have any capital property to put against the risk bearing of that bond. So I just want to say that there's been others that have looked at us, went through the equity audit process to make sure we had accessibility, that we had opportunity, that we didn't have disproportionate discipline, and our student achievement did not have a gap between our non-white students and our white students in attendance, which is a fascinating piece that's documented in those school performance frameworks from the state of Colorado. So that's kind of my spiel of why the BOCES, why it existed, why those individuals came together, the heart and spirit of those original documents. I picked that document box up from the archives at Cherry Creek about 4 years ago. We had a administrative assistant say, hey, I got this old Remsel box, you want it? And I went and got it. And, it's these original news stories about, in 1993, this organization coming together with 5 other pioneer partners across the country, of which 2 still exist, ourselves and another school program. So that's kind of the spiel there. I would say in my notes, in preparing for this, this document will go through a process of renewal this year. And I would like or hope for the spirit of that renewal is how do we focus our outcomes in our strategic plan around serving students in this community and continuing to partner together with our 5 member districts. This place is amazing for all students that seek to attend. And I ask that you look at that when you work with your council, because I'm sure you're going to get questions. Ask for collaboration with your council as you make these decisions in your district. It's really about how do those goals work here, not necessarily how to take a goal from your larger metro district and make it fit in that document. You know, for example, Douglas County has a lot of choice opportunity through the charter network of schools. How they enroll their kids can't be the same way that we enroll our kids across 5 districts at Denver or at Remsel. You know, same with Denver. Denver has a robust, amazing school choice program, but that school choice program for a district of 90,000 doesn't exactly fit for a place that serves 400 kids with a proportionate allotment of spots across 5 districts. We have a third-party audited software company out of Louisiana, Schoolmint, that runs our enrollment system for us, so it's independent of the school. It was audited to be equitable for families. We have financial assistance and aid for anyone who wants to attend. Julie can speak to the fact that she's met with many of you around that we have a robust pool, so anyone has access and opportunity to be here. So I would say as we go through that lens, I just ask that trying to fit oval pegs into round holes can be challenging at times, and so I just ask that the spirit of the negotiation, the spirit of the process, is to look at how we maybe get those same outcomes, but through the structure that works here in support of us. So I'm going to stop there before I go through the nuts and bolts of how that will happen. So any questions from board members, conversation, things about this document?
And just jump in. I see, David, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks. And thanks, Chad. And I'll apologize to all of you because I'm the newbie on the block and just beginning to understand this concept, even though I've known it's been around for a while. And as an elementary principal, it was great for me to be able to have that choice to encourage parents to consider, like you said, Chad, when, you know, I had a student or two that really it was obvious that the typical elementary school was not working for. What I'm trying to understand is, as you said, Chad, this was created 29 years ago, kind of under the guise of the need for an alternative instructional delivery choice for students. And as we have evolved in all our districts to where even in Douglas County, we have several ideations of expeditionary learning existing in our school district. Has there been kind of a reevaluation whether the 5 district partnership is still there, that there's a rationale that says that 5 district partnership is still the unique or the critical key of this school? You know, just looking at enrollment, it looks like the majority of enrollment is from DPS. For instance, I think we have a fraction of number of students from Douglas County. So and if this is getting us into a place where you don't want to go yet, please slow me down. But I'm just trying to understand, is the need still the same as it was 29 years ago in terms of this BOCES type partnership?
Sure. Thank you, David. I think the question has come up at the previous negotiation point, at the infusion of the bond capital and going out for that 30-year equity bond. That's come up many times, and it's been conversation across board members, parent community, and school district officials and administrators. And I think what the conclusion has come back to is the districts have no contractual services or monetary allocation to Remsel, and there is no limiting factor for a student to attend. So like when I spoke to Superintendent Weiss 6 months ago, you know, he went through a series of questions about that, similar to your questions as a board member, in looking at, you know, are we sending dollars to Remsel? Are we sending services to Remsel? Do we have things that are limiting kids' dollars or accessibility in Douglas County that are being deferred to Remsel? And the answer to that was no. And the conclusion that he and I reached in that conversation, and I think many others have reached through the process of continuing this partnership, is there's no limiting factor for example, the 17 students that are attending from Douglas County to be limited from having that ability to continue their tenure here at Remsel. Don't know if that's the necessarily the right conclusion, but certainly the conclusion that's been drawn upon is a board, a group of leaders would never want to diminish that option from a family if there's no kind of negative implication to the partner district is where that's coming back to. Carrie asked me a question here. I'll take that and then turn it over to someone else. District allocations, you'll see on page 1 of the IGA. It was done in a metric previous. The first revision that I worked with on this document with the boards was an up to metric. So if you add all those up, it equals 440, not the 400 that we enroll, but it gives us the option to, if Douglas County's short a seat, we can pull a student in from Littleton or another district based on where they are on the wait list. So what that is up to 200 from Denver, up to 110 from Cherry Creek, up to 50 from Douglas County, up to 40 from Littleton Public Schools, up to 40 from Aurora Public Schools. I don't have the specific breakdowns, but I can get that to the board from Chris. I will say the only district that is underfilled pretty consistently due to geographical location has been Douglas County for the last few years. And like I said, I do think that 17 to 50 number is accurate. Break that down. 75% of our enrollment comes from 2 partner districts in Denver and Cherry Creek, based on the geographical location of Remsel in Southeast Denver on the border. You cross over Evans onto Holly, and you were essentially in the Cherry Creek School District for a duration of time before you bounce back into Denver with how the lines are drawn. So certainly the answer I have, the answer we've defaulted to. Coulter asked a specific question. So to introduce Coulter is our outside counsel at Kaplan and Ernst. She's been with us for about 7 years. Phenomenal law firm. I know that many of you do consult services with their legal team. We'll speak to that negotiation structure in a minute. But she asked me a question in preparing for these negotiation structures of, do you have any specific service-based relationships with any of your districts? And we do have 2 relationships that are contractual outside of this document. One being our lease. We lease this facility through the term of, Julie, 2050 with the Denver Public Schools. So we signed that lease agreement 2 years ago for 30-year term. And so we do lease this property. We did privately with the work of the BEST grant, do a $12 million renovation to campus funded by Remsel to provide resources and support to our kids. And then the second one was we do utilize Denver Public Schools as our LEA for special education. So we do purchase that service. That service is outlined in the IGA, and as presented for new members to this board, that would be the only aspect of this that is a non-negotiated aspect because it is a contractual arrangement between one party and how they deliver LEA services. So we do ask that as we go through that process that, I'll use Aurora Public Schools because they're not here on this, but Aurora can't say, oh, we'd like this LEA to do these things specifically different. We're not able to negotiate that. We adopt that as an element of our partnership. But hope I didn't ramble through too much and provided some context there, David.
Thank you, Chad. I do see in the chat that we have a request to get the actual numbers from the school district. So, and maybe we can share that also either on the website or at our January meeting, but I know that would be helpful. And Scott Balderman, I saw that you have a question as well. Thank you.
So it's Chad, it's obvious that this is an amazing model and a great program. And you mentioned the uniqueness of being BOCES. What limiting factors would you see under a charter governance model, innovations? I mean, DPS is, we have 200 buildings and half of them are innovation and charter. What limiting factors do you see in those governance models?
The largest limiting factor would be if we to charter under a single district institution, the students that attend from those outside districts would be unable to access that through the enrollment model that we have as outlined in the IGA agreement. So we would be, working with a single district instead of a multi-district partnership, and specifically kids. I'll use Cherry Creek as the second largest partner. What then happens to those 110 students that are enrolling annually from Cherry Creek seeking this option? And so I think that's the biggest limiting factor is the way kids get to attend or continue to attend here at REMSL would be limited by becoming a charter organization. I think there's competing limiting factors around school finance. REMSL's funded through the PPR model. We do not receive any mill levy override or bond funding from any of our 5 district partners. So that is not a sharing at this time, has not been a sharing over the duration of the term here. We do receive roughly $300,000 annually from the Colorado Department of Education to provide additional services as a BOCES. So we do have some access to funding that we wouldn't have, so to speak, if we were an organization under CSI, where the 5 district partnership could continue as a charter school institute school. And so I think there's some competing factors there. And I look at it from the lens of, working with the 5 districts and serving the 5 districts and families has been successful. And so I hope it's something that can continue to be accessible to them.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions before we jump into the IGA? I think that's the next piece, and then going into the strategic plan and everything else. All right, Chad, we'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. I'm trying to grab something really quick. Okay, here, I got it. Sorry, when you're the tech person and the driver, we just did our annual bond end of year reporting with student enrollment. All right, it's our compliance certificate for the year. So I'm going to go up here because Chris just did this. Oh, and of course, it's going to be in percentage and not by number. So I was going to give you the exact numbers by district, but I don't have that. No, I don't have that in that document and number. It's in percentage base. So I'll pull the exact numbers and provide them. Negotiations around IGA. The way our council would like to structure this, the previous board has been supportive of that. Hopefully the new board will continue to be supportive of that. Is Culture would like to run this. I would like her to run this from the lens of everything that we're doing right now to be operationalized and serving kids in-person learning every day with limited staff resources. She's proposed a process of which by February 1st, she will get conflict of interest waivers signed from each of the district councils. She's been in contact with each of the district councils so that Kaplan and Ernst can serve in that role. Kaplan and Ernst works in your districts, and they just got to make sure that there's no conflicting work of this contract negotiation with other things that will be going on. Her intent is for February 11th to receive initial comment from all 5 district partners on this document. So from their council directly to her. Her and I then will workshop those comments over a period of a week for a February 17th version 2 draft of this to send back to districts, which things we think we can adopt, things that we think would create challenge, things that the board should discuss in further detail. We'll open up for that for comment at our February 22nd meeting. And then from February 28th through March 11th, with the date to be determined, the board council and the board members would provide any final comment and create a final working negotiated draft of that. And then a meeting would be held, which would be a negotiation meeting between the 5 district board members as well as the 5 district council in one session. So the opportunity for an open meeting around that negotiated process with a final approval of the districts between March 21st and April 15th, and then hopefully for a BOCES adoption on April 19th.
So that also gives us time to be able to circle back with our individual boards and just make sure that they're up to speed. I know I've been in touch with our portfolio office that is planning on doing some 2x2s with our board, with the Denver Public Schools board members, just to share where we are. And then you all, well, actually, two of you on this call, Brianna, I don't know that you take it to anybody, but our other districts can just make sure that our board colleagues understand what's in the IGA and the structure. What I've found is there's not really a whole lot of understanding of what BOCES is and what RIMSL does, and I'd like to be able to elevate that to make sure that all of us understand exactly what RIMSL is all about. So any questions on that timeline for Chad? Brianna? Thank you.
Yeah, could you direct me to where that process and timeline is outlined on the documents that you sent us? I was looking through and I don't see it there. If it's not here, I'm wondering if you could either email it or include it in the notes. I would like to contribute and also take back the specific document to Sue, who's served on the board and is the CEO of PEBC, to provide our perspective and feedback as well.
Absolutely. Great question. It's not in there. I did not get the opportunity to speak to Coulter until 4 p.m. Last night. Unfortunately, their firm is located in Boulder, and her partner that does real estate and finance unfortunately lost their home in the fire. So Coulter's been doing her work and this work. And so she got back to me last night. We outlined this last evening. So I'll put it in a response email so you all have those exact dates. She's fully committed to doing the work and making things happen. Just as a firm, they're sharing some responsibilities right now based on things that have transpired. So you were totally accurate in not finding it.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, that's just going to help me do a little bit of backward planning to make sure that, y'all are getting the information that you need to move this forward.
Great, thank you.
And Chad, Coulter will reach out to our legal counsels. We don't have to be the go-between. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep, that is the procedure she would like to take.
Great. And then Carrie, what specifically, as far as a question to our board members, how would you frame that question in terms of this process? I heard you say, making sure that the board is aware that this IGA is about to be renegotiated. How else would you frame the question in terms of what we need to get from our boards?
I think it's more information. I would ask whoever, whomever your general counsel is who will be working with Coulter, just ask them what would be the right timing to be able to just share with your boards what the IGA is, just so they're aware, since we serve students from so many different districts and will be representatives of our district on the RIMSL board as we represent our students, or from PEBC, just to be sure that they're aware of what's happening. I don't know that there's necessarily a question, just to make sure that they're informed so that they know what it is. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, Chad, for getting this together for us. And wow, I didn't realize that about Coulter. I'm really sorry to hear. So many people that I know have been affected by the fire. And I know that one of our board colleagues has been rehoming people. Reverend Lorvik has been really instrumental in trying to help people find homes. So we certainly understand the timing delay on that. So thank you so much, Chad, for all that work. And we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is our draft strategic plan.
Great, thank you, Carrie. This work came from an initiative of the board in 2019, and I'll use the words of former President Perez. She said, this is a checkup. Every organization needs a checkup on health and wellness around how they're doing, how they're serving kids and families, how they're working with their partners. And the board hired an outside third party, Miss Toy Massey from the Animas Foundation and the Jekyll Foundation, to come in and do that health checkup through an equity audit. And she looked at RIMSL through 4 specific lenses and made outcomes based on her findings during that time. The board put together a summary of those findings and letter, which you have attached in the appendix of this. So that's called BOCES Equity Audit Summary Findings. And she looked at 4 specific domains, which were access, opportunity, student achievement, and discipline. She met with parents in the community across a diverse series of backgrounds, ages, special education, district partners. She met with all of our staff members and did private one-on-one interviews, and kind of did this health and wellness checkup. She met with Julie. She came in and we gave her an infinite campus access to look at discipline, to look at the findings of how we implement our discipline matrix here at REMSL. What proportionate allocations do we have in discipline? And she really came to find that REMSL is in a great, stable place. In her words, she wished that she would have known about this for her daughter that attended a private high school, and found that there's a lot of opportunity here for kids and families, and that there were really no barriers to accessibility other than the classic school of choice charter barrier, which is transportation. How do you get here? She also found that it would be great if in a place like this for serving special education students, if we had more access to some technology resources and accessibility and things that may not always be available in a place of this size. But she didn't tie that to us. She tied that to the larger funding conversation at the state level. So all in all, you can find her findings. I think it was fascinating to work with her. I think it was fascinating for our staff to work with her. And as an element of that, there are 2 other corresponding documents with this in the appendix that I think are important. You have the community survey of the entire REMSL parent community. That survey is sent itemized to an email per household. So if you have a 2-parent household, you get 1 unique ID. If you have a split household, you get 2 unique IDs. So we got a diverse range of perspective from each individual household. So somebody couldn't get on, take it to the library, take it on a device, take it to work, whether to provide a really positive outlook or a really negative outlook. So it was a very precise, I think, accurate survey. I think there's extremely valuable information in there. That information, along with the TLCC survey, which is conducted by Cambridge Education for teachers in Colorado, the Teachers Learning Conditions in Colorado survey, provides that perspective of how teachers feel, and that's given them a unique code. It's collected and produced by a third party, and so how do those things of third party consult, audit, parent survey, teacher survey play into the creation of this document? And this document's been working for a little over a year and a half. We would have hoped that it would have been a more consolidated timeline, but we all know what we've been navigating in public schools. But here it is, and I think it is written in a way that is extremely robust, that touches on each of the outcomes we're hoping to look at here at school, from organizational design, diversity, equity, inclusion, student achievement, social emotional health and wellness, our aspect of our adventure and fieldwork, our teachers retention, growth, our financial position. It addresses in goal 8 our organization as a BOCES and why it continues has been positive. We took all of that through writing, revision with the board, revision with our crew leadership team of teachers, of which are represented at each of our school levels, our specialists and our learning specialists. And then we put it out to our parents for a survey. We used the same survey structure we used for the community survey, and we went from 141 respondents down to 20. So I don't know that we have an effective number of survey results to go through the next step of revision at this time. So what I would ask of the board today is we're dynamic. We're trying to deploy different strategies to get that feedback. I use a term that's been used in one of our partner districts of new leadership coming on board, doing a listening tour, connecting with community in different ways. I'm open to do that over the next course of 2 weeks, do a virtual session with our community here at REMSL, and then do an in-person session outside at our outdoor learning labs to safely navigate that in the current COVID conditions, and record those sessions and try to collect themes and feedback from an in-person model, since the survey was not as effective. Do a fifth revision of that document and bring it back to the board of the February meeting if the board is supportive of that next step, and any feedback from the board you may have of how we continue working through the finalization of this document.
Thank you, Chad, for being thoughtful about that. I know that you were really disappointed with the results. So I appreciate you thinking sort of outside the box to figure out how can we get more people to respond. I think we talked yesterday and we think, a combination of it's COVID, people are tired. They're probably dealing with a lot of stress that we can't even begin to know about. As we all know in our personal lives, we've all known somebody who's been affected by COVID or job loss or all of the above. So I think that's a great idea to get us started. I'd open it up for feedback if any of you have any feedback or questions for Chad around that, to be able to learn more about what the RIMSL community is thinking.
I guess I'll follow up with just your explanation. What I understand just the heaviness of this time and folks just juggling a million things. I'm wondering if you have any other ideas in terms of how the survey was, any other explanations about why there was such a low turnout for this? Was it implemented in a different way? I'm just wondering if you've exhausted the sort of reasons why there may have been a low response rate.
I would say anything at this time would be a conjecture of that, not anything substantiated with data or facts. I think the ask of this is a more robust ask because of the density of the document. We tried to structure that survey in a way that gave people the opportunity to see the goal in agreement or disagreement, climate with that specific goal, each of the 8 goals, and then ask them for commentary around things that they believed were effective or should be consideration for being revised. I think the density of the document is one component. I think the ask right now is hard, and I don't want to overemphasize. I don't default to a COVID excuse in my leadership. I don't default to a COVID excuse in the work we're trying to do with kids. So I don't want to place that there, but I can say that, families are dealing with challenges right now of how to be at school every day, how to be present in their employment, how to be present in the lives of their kids, how to serve, other communities that they're connected with. So I don't have a scientific answer for you. It was sent in the same manner with a email from the school that said, you're going to be getting this. It comes through the same InfoCampus messenger system that we get all other information through. And then the secondary layer of that, since it's uniquely assigned, those are unique assigns come through SurveyMonkey. Did check in with parents that, staff members that have kids here, and they're like, oh yeah, we got it. Came straight to our inbox. It didn't go to spam. So I think the method of request was the same as that survey that we received 141 responses for, but I can't give you a super scientific answer of why.
Yeah, and just so I'm understanding correctly, are you imagining administering this survey, like each year, or was it specifically in preparation for revision of the StratOp plan?
It was specifically in service of this document and this revision. And then we will give in the spring, since we give that big community survey every other year, we'll give that survey again. That survey is simpler. It's simpler in design of, state your satisfaction level with your crew leader in relationship to your child this year. Check one of the boxes. It's not extrapolating the density of this request. And I don't know if that's the reason we received more responses, but it was in formulating this specific survey. It was really hard to try to simplify something as needing to be as organizationally complex as this is. So I think the option for bringing people together and recording and doing a listening tour may work. It may not work, and we may be back to the drawing board as a group to finalize this.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then the final thing I will say is, yeah, I appreciate just sort of exhausting potential reasons and modifications that can be made in this process. And should you do a listening tour or focus groups, I can certainly help facilitate some of that if you need folks to do that. I think eventually I would like to revisit the conversation around equity audits and having consistent sort of those health and wellness checkups, if you will, because I think that they provide a lot of great information. So that can be tabled until our January conversation, knowing that this is the more urgent matter. But yeah, I would be more than happy to help if needed.
Thank you, Brianna. Ditto, I would as well. If you want a board member to be with you at any of those to help facilitate or whatever, just count on us, Chad. We stand ready to help. David, I think I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, I think the listening tour makes a lot of sense when you're looking at evaluating strategic plans. I'm not sure a survey necessarily meets that need anyway, because you really want that depth of conversation, that depth of dialogue when you're really, like you said, Chad, dealing with such a dense topic as vision and action setting and goals and things like that. So I mean, it's interesting that your biannual community survey seemed to have a great response, but those are easy questions. Do I like the math program? Well, yes or no. Where when you're dealing with vision and strategy and action, that takes a different kind of thinking, and I'm not sure your survey would capture well that anyway. So I would just agree with both Brianna and Carrie that the listening tours to me make a lot more sense anyway as a mechanism as you're evaluating your strategic plan, as opposed to just a simple survey. So go forth and conquer.
Thank you. I agree. And you get the nuance of actually talking with people in person, of things that you might not get on the survey. So thanks for thinking of that, Chad. We appreciate that.
All right. Well, that is the kind of the robustness of this workshop that we had for onboarding today. The one thing I would provide as a resource in the way we structured this, and we do still have time, so I would open up questions or requests for additional things that will help you in serving the REMSL board. The items in italics on the agenda, I provided you with our most recent school accreditation report. I provided you the 1-year analysis, and I provided you the 3-year analysis. We are accredited. The state recognizes us as our independent BOCES or district, and so our accreditation report comes through CDE. We've been accredited with distinction for the last 3 disbursements of the accreditation report. So doing really well in the metrics that the state looks at, which are often tied to standardized test scores, achievement of our various diverse populations of students, and our post-secondary readiness. I think those reports are helpful to provide that big overall look. The 3-year is probably a more valuable tool than the 1-year, because what it does is it consolidates the achievement and growth of kids that stay across multiple grades, and can look at how specifically a student with an IEP might be achieving, or a student identified as one of the populations that the report looks at may be achieving as they stay at an institution or a school longer term. So I think that's a valuable tool. You have most recent student achievement data. So you can look at that. You can look for pandemic gaps. You can look at where our kids are at, what adjustments we've made here at school to serve those kids. We use that data. We've been continuing to give iReady data. So if you ever wanted to see more specific data to kids that we use quarterly here at school, we're very fortunate to have a literacy interventionist and a math interventionist that is able to jump in to help with additional support and services for any student that falls in the 20th percentile that has not been identified for a document of special needs. So we use that ongoing data, and we use the CMOS data to provide those intervention and supports for our kids. You can also see where our kids are college ready. We offer the PSAT cycle. We partner with a third-party provider to give that to our kids in the fall. We feel it's just an additional touch point with that test before the state assesses them in the spring. Gives them the opportunity, the kids, to ask questions about where they are, what domains they fall into, what things they may need additional support with. As you can see, our SAT score pretty consistently is at or above the state average for the SAT for our kids. And I love that our kids grow about 10% from that initial administration to the spring administration each year. So powerful tool. And then you have those looks at surveys, teacher voice, community voice, outside voice. And then the last one that, it's always a board topic. It's a piece that comes up. It's something you all want to know about, is things that are going on here at RIMSL. You have the calendar for this year, the calendar for next year. So winter conferences, events, staff retreats, crew trips, conferences, end of the year passage and portfolio, graduation. So you have that for this specific year and for next year, and know that, in the next year cycle, we'll continue to approve calendars as we look outwardly. So just wanted to review that. I think those are valuable documents for the board. Julie provides all of those financial documents and support. I know that you've come in and worked with her specifically on our financial health and where we are as an organization. So thank you to Julie for doing a great job with those. So I'll open it for commentary, questions, anything that this group feels they need in addition to, and then I'll close with one caveat. We're here, we're open, we're serving kids. You are welcome to come in if you'd like. We have a plethora of N95 masks available to meet with a staff member, to meet with our kids, or to be present. Our doors are open. You're welcome as board members to come in, check in at any time. Myself or one of my administrative colleagues will be here. So doors are open. Come in and meet. Ask any questions you have of me. Ask any questions of our staff, or just come in and see the great things that are happening in schools. And I know that those equivalent great things are happening in schools of your district. So those are my kind of thoughts. And so questions or needs of the board.
Before I jump it over to everybody else to answer that question, I'd just like to again thank Julie for all of her hard work on finances. For the new board colleagues, she's great. If you want to sit down and talk with her, she can give you a detailed explanation. Any questions you have about the finance documents, Julie's got a quick and ready answer without even any preparation. Think you just know this internally, Julie, right? Like it just flows from you. So she's done such a great job. So we really appreciate your service to RIMSL. I think you go above and beyond. I know it's your job, but I see the care with which you do this. So thank you. So anybody else have any other questions or comments? And then I have one other agenda item before we close today as well.
Hey,
David.
Chad, just a quick question, follow up with what Brianna was asking, to go more in depth with the equity audit. Did I miss that attachment, or is it named something different than equity audit?
You have the findings. It says BOCES equity audit 2019-2022 summary findings. And that was, let me go back to the email here real quick of where it was. And I'll pull that again just when I respond with some of these elements. So you have it. It was, let's see here. It's called BOCES Communication Final 1920 SY.
Got it. Okay.
And there's a PDF, but I'll pull it in and put it in my response again as well.
And you mentioned there were 4 filters. You said access, achievement, student discipline. I missed the 4th one.
Let me pull it up here just so I'll read directly from it.
I think it was opportunity.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they specifically looked at a few things. We did a big policy revision, and then the 4 things that the consultant looked at were access and opportunity, funding, achievement, and discipline policies and practices.
Okay, so yes, the funding was very good. That was what I missed. And then does RIMSL have an equity policy?
We have our non-discrimination and harassment policies. Those are updated and revised and looked at. We do not have a policy that would specifically be named outside of that, but updating that policy annually as I would say Colorado revised statute and federal law changes and is updated. Worked very specifically with Coulter this year to start the school year around specific opportunity and access issues for students that are now non-gender identifying, and the relationship of that to participation in programs outside of school, and having her legal team weigh in on practices and procedures for that, specifically of which they elected to use the standard of the Colorado High School Sports and Athletics Association. So if a student identified as a female student to participate in a sport, they would participate in that gender identity through the duration of that sport. And we use that standard for the same as participation in our program here. So that work is continuing to evolve. It continues to evolve and progress annually, and we are very fortunate that we get updates from our legal firm to look and consult with those policies and practices. And I'd say we are an extremely inclusive organization, and of which I think the care and attention we can provide to families for safety, social, emotional health and well-being, inclusivity, crew, and connectivity that we provide here. Those things happen in what Kurt Hahn called in the small. Those conversations have to be with families, with teachers, with kids. And I think that is the beauty of this place, is when kids come in and they feel that relationship get established, so they have that emotional safety. And so we tie that back to that AC policy as we continue to make those revisions and work. Our policies are up to date, but I would say up to date is an evolutionary term in schools and districts as we continue to grow and develop. So I think we're in a healthy place and always willing to progress as needed.
I know a lot of us are grappling with, the whole notion of equity and some of the unfortunate movement that has tainted that term as meaning something completely different than what it is. And I do think, Chad, your school is, I think, the lighthouse for what inclusivity looks like and what access and opportunity looks like. And so I'm just looking, I guess, from a selfish point of view of drawing from some of the things that Rumsell has done that maybe might help our partner districts lead the way in terms of reestablishing some of the terminology, if you will, for what we mean when we talk about access and opportunity and equity and diversity and all that. So I find it interesting that you don't have an independent policy that really speaks to that, because you are breathing and living it. And I appreciate that, you're using the AC policy or the non-discrimination harassment policy as kind of your pathway, but it just seems like if there is a way for us to capture what it is that you guys do that really makes this work well and is really the model for what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like, I would love to be able to tap that. So just speaking from a selfish perspective, I suppose.
I think David, I love the invitation to speak to that a little bit here at Remsel. In 1993, there were 10 outward bound design principles outlined, and one of those design principles in 1993 was diversity and inclusion. And so it has been a fabric of the model of how these schools are constructed, in that we have one course of study per grade. So for example, we do see kids transition between 8th and 9th grade, go to a larger public high school, have the opportunity to take many different math courses, whereas here you have one course of study per grade, and we have to differentiate in that one course of study. I taught 8th grade math here for second semester last year at Remsel in the pandemic, in the hybrid, and it's a tough job. It's a rewarding job. We build themes and projects. We went out in the parking lot because we couldn't go anywhere else, and we figured out how many tennis balls would fit in a Remsel bus. And you got to diversify that conceptual idea down to kids that are just learning some operational mathematical skills that they could be struggling with, and try to conceptualize that of how many tennis balls can you get in here and build community and relationships amongst teams. Say two more things in relationship to that, to this place, for our audience, for our parents, for everyone, our board members. There's something magical in 5th grade. Exterior, it can be viewed as a layer of privilege of this place. we take or historically took our 5th grade kids on a sailing trip around Catalina Island. That's funded through our fieldwork fees, where we collect a portion of that each year that pays into that, and we have full financial aid for any student in attendance to go. There's something magical when you take a kid from a landlocked state and you place them on a historic tall ship, and they've seen the ocean for the first time, and you create that opportunity for kids. You know, don't know how you scale that up to large districts, but it makes a difference. You'll have kids that speak at our open houses, and they talk about that life-changing event of, never saw the ocean before, I'd never been on a plane. You know, Rimsel took me to DU, and we participated in swim lessons so that I could learn to swim, which is not something that, you know, I had known before being a 5th grader at Rimsel. And then I think one of the second things that we do with kids, and we have to get back to it. We got to get back to a sense of normal. It won't be this year. It'll be hopefully next year. Is when we study civil rights in context and application to present day America, we take our kids to Memphis, Little Rock, and Birmingham, and we provide them a firsthand experience of lived experience, something that is challenging for them to conceptualize in suburban metro Denver, and it makes a powerful difference. I think it makes a difference in how kids view the world, how kids view upcoming decisions around attendance at universities, professional pieces. And then we added a third layer to this work right before the pandemic started, and our kids were absolutely devastated. We have a partnership now with the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And if you know anything about Pine Ridge, the median income is $4,000 per family. 96% of families live in poverty. And for our kids there to go, and as the speakers came and spoke at our school and the institutions we worked with, understand that we're not welcome. We're not a welcome presence as a Caucasian individual living in America, and understanding that that's not an unwelcomeness of hate. It's an unwelcomeness of lived experience. And what our kids found in that was to overcome that, to be a community member in those places, and to not be there in a place of privilege, is to go back more than once, and to give back more than once, and to be ready. We got a in-kind letter from the tribal chief that told us, thank you. The drive that we did prior to the pandemic starting provided diapers, resources. Sorry, big district folks. I let kids go to Home Depot on their open lunch and purchase chainsaws, because that was on the list that they needed. So they came to school with chainsaws, and they took 3 chainsaws to them. We loaded 2 full semi trucks and sent resources. And the tribal chief told us that because we weren't able to drop those off and attend in March of that year, it lasted up until May for that community. And that community has built a relationship with us because we're demonstrating that we're not there as spectators, we're there as individuals to learn, respect the values of that community, and give back in kind in ways that we can. So the only thing I can say to that for districts or anyone, you're doing great work. You got great people, you've got great kids and families. We're all progressing. This is the beauty of living in the United States of America, is we're imperfect and we're willing to get better. We're a country, a nation of providing public education to kids and teaching kids how to improve and be better human beings and be better citizens. And so I don't know if you can show kids the ocean for the first time, or put them on the steps of Little Rock Central High School, or put them in a community, but anytime that you can do that and provide a real and lived experience, I think it makes a substantial difference. So those are just some of the things that we found to live, work, and breathe, and they don't live in a policy document yet, so to speak.
Chad, one question kind of to tack on to David's. So you don't have any specific policies around equity, but do you have a committee or a staff member who's doing that work, or is it really just an organic thing? That's my first question. And then second, I actually grew up not far from Pine Ridge, and so thank you for the work that you're doing there. I have been personally impacted by that community for most of my growing up years. So yeah, thank you for that.
it starts with the work that we do at ground school every year, and the start that we do with teachers and staff, and that's being a crew leader. Being a crew leader means that you're with a multi-age group of kids and you serve in that role of teacher and counselor. It's a process that continues to grow and develop, but it provides kids what they describe in their own words as a second family, a second home. And that's that place where we don't have a PBIS social emotional program. We have an expeditionary learning program. And so I can say, I love stories. I love things that happen in our community. We had some new students arrive at Denver this year in some of our upper grades, weren't going to attend their backpacking trip. We're nervous, concerned, those pieces. And literally by the end of the first day of school, the students came to me and said, "Hey, Chad, is it okay if my parents get our documents together tonight? Because we now want to go." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." I was like, "Getting these med documents together is going to be brain damage, but yep, we're doing it. Let's make sure you're on the bus tomorrow." So I think that is more of the storytelling that, the voice of kids and the voice of teachers of, it's okay to be nervous, to go to a new place, to be at a new place, to try something new, to feel like what fitting in looks like, and to know that, in the course of a day, the climate of the crews here at REMSL is that, no, we want you to go, we want you to participate, and the receipt of that is kids wanting to go. So felt good way to start the year.
Thank you, Chad, for that. Oh, David, did you have
Just a
something
quick
else you wanted to
follow-up.
add?
Yeah, so first of all, Chad, I love your passion. By the way, oh my gosh, I can tell that you are the pulse of that school just listening to you. So thank you for just this early in the morning, inspiring all of us to be better. So I just want to thank you for that. But my question though, since we're a board that I think I understand is more of a policy governance type board, do we have access? Where do we get access to your policies? Do we have operational policies versus policy governance policies? Where do we get access to that?
Sure. It's under the BOCES tab on the website, but I'll give you the exact link when I respond today to make it accessible to you.
Great, thank you. And do you find, Chad, I mean, do you find that this board is able to stay at the policy governance level in terms of really just holding you accountable to deliver the policies, as opposed to us inserting ourselves and telling you how to carry those out? I mean, are we truly a policy governance board, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
I would say yes, in the sense that if there's ever time that would have tested that, there was trust in my leadership here over the course of the pandemic to communicate with families, to communicate with CDPHE, Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, Tri-County, make operational decisions to keeping us open, providing access to conversations that were happening in districts is that kind of modification there of, Chad, don't do this on an island. Here's something that Littleton has that's going to go out just so you can see it. Here's something we're thinking about and considering in Denver Public Schools. Here's something that we're looking at in Douglas County schools, and how it's going to be implemented. So I think if anything, the last few years have proven that it's been pretty successful here at REMSL. I think my desire to serve my tenure in education here at REMSL and to have done so for over a decade in leadership has been proven that there's some trust constructed around that tenure of time. My greatest intention for this place is to make sure that when my tenure expires here at REMSL, that it'll be in a place for someone else to step in and be able to carry it forward. We've put in place a lot of things right now that are I think transformative. There's a platform for a vision for 10 years of strategic design. There's facility and resources that we didn't have access to otherwise. We didn't have, bond funding from districts, mill levy override. I shook every tree branch to which being one of the two only BOCES ever to be approved for the Building Excellent Schools Today grant. to have state-of-the-art resources for our kids, and we had to go get those in an alternative way. And so I think this place is in a really stable, growth-minded, positive position, and it will outlive what will be my educational tenure as a leader, and that's my greatest hope. So it's not about me; it's about the high fives from the kindergartners that'll graduate from here when I'm not a administrator anymore. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you. Salahan.
First, I want to apologize. I need to run here in a minute to take my daughter to school. And just wanted to thank you, Chad, for the discussion. I'm looking at the BOCES policy page now. And after having gone through a 10-month process of transitioning to a true governance model, I'm not trying to be difficult, but what I'm seeing here is not policy governance.
Okay.
And David, you're using policy governance buzzwords of board versus administrative policies, but I think having experienced this process of transitioning, it's amazing. So if this group body does want to be policy governance, I would go all in and truly be that governance model, because it's really good. If you read John Carver's books, he'll tell you there's no such thing as modified or partially implemented policy governance. It's really all or nothing. So just some feedback. And it's like, if you're going to do policy governance, I would go all out. Highly recommended.
Yeah, I would just echo what Scott, thanks for being here. I know you got to run, but I would echo too, in order to protect Rumsell, I think I would really encourage us, maybe as a board, to look at that notion that Scott's encouraging us to do too, because I think you're right, Chad. You guys are living and breathing a lot of the stuff, but I don't know that we're properly protecting you with updated policies so that someone comes in doesn't misinterpret those. And so I would agree with Scott. I think there's maybe some work to do in that area.
Before I turn it over to Brianna, I appreciate this discussion because I think this is something that we've wrestled with, and that's why I sort of said in the beginning when we looked at the board member handbook, like it's different. Even myself reading it over the weekend, now that I know what I know about policy governance, after having worked on it for 10 months with Denver Public Schools and with Matt Cook from Colorado Associations of School Boards, who's absolutely fabulous, I understand it better, and I understand how we can better function as a board ourselves, like thinking about how we can be more engaged and how we can understand how to set the mission and vision, and then to be able to definitely protect Chad and still be involved and provide the direction that he needs. So that would be what I'd be looking forward to for us as a board to work on, to be able to set some of those procedures and policies in place. So Brianna?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm just going to name that I don't know about policy governance in terms of the depth that you all do, but I am going to speak about policies. So I just want to name that because I think we might be talking about different realms here, but I want to go back just knowing that my position as Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is really interested in some of the comments David and Angela, and questions that you were posing. So I will start off by saying I also am impressed by, looking at your equity audit data and student achievement data. It's obvious that you all are doing really incredible work. And on my own DEI journey, I'm learning that this, it can't just live within us, like these beliefs. There really is power in having some explicit policies that are infused with DEI, and then policies that are also specific to diversity, equity, and inclusion as both separate standalone concepts and concepts that are interrelated and feed off of one another. So with that said, when I hear you talk about, Chad, how you want to eventually leave Rumsell in a place where someone can step in and continue that work, I would say that having some policies specific to DEI would be very important in terms of foundational aspects and leaving a legacy, right? I think without those, there's a danger that you could be leading with those dispositions and that knowledge. And so having some of that documented, I think, allows for someone to come in and have something to build off of, and modify, with community support if need be. So that's the first part of what I'm saying. The second piece, going back to my own just learning in this role as director of DEI, is that I'm leaning into the process of this being more a process and a journey, right? So not necessarily like an outcome. And what I would encourage both you, Chad, and the broader, our board and the broader REMSL community to think about is, our DEI work being less as a checkbox and, okay, we have one equity audit, we're good to go, but that's one data point, just like we would do in the classroom, right? So how do we collect multiple data points so that as REMSL, they can continue to grow and strengthen their DEI focus and work and service. I'll name that PEBC has partnered with an organization called Promise 54, and we're doing 2 surveys every year. I'm not proposing that REMSL works with them necessarily or does this, but what I'm saying is we have the same surveys that we do a couple times a year. And what we're working towards is to have some longitudinal data to show how our DEI strengths and also our pain points, because we know that there are always going to be both of those as we develop as an organization. So I can offer more information just about that process and how our goals have shifted, depending on the results of those surveys, because it is a dynamic process. And, very candidly, I will say that, they have Promise 54 has 4 different profiles, organizational profiles: early stage, kindred, diversified, and advanced. And right now we're like right in the kindred stage where we have really high inclusion, really high equity, and just staff experience, but there's low diversity. And so we know that with that combination of that profile, we have very specific goals that we are working on to maintain the equity and inclusion, but also to increase diversity. So I offer that really as a more nuanced way of sort of approaching DEI work moving forward. And I would be honored, I'd be, willing to support in that work. However, the board and REMSL decides fit.
Brianna, I'm wondering if you could share with all of us in an email just more about Promise 54. I'd be really interested in learning more about that. And I'd like to respond to your first comment, because that was something we at DPS really wrestled with as we started working on policy governance. One of the criticisms I've heard of policy governance from across the country, I actually work with someone in Kansas City who talked about this, is it can silence voices. And so we wanted to be sure that at every step of the way with policy governance, we were weaving in exactly what you said, like how are we not having equity be standalone, but something that's in all of ours, in everything that we do. And so we started out with framing our policy governance around our equity statement. And probably the highest compliment we got was Dr. Maria Salazar from DU picked it up out of nowhere, and she said, wow, what is this? How did you come up with this? This is fabulous. And we were really excited because sometimes, as you all know, you get sort of inside your own world and you're like, this sounds great. But when somebody outside your community picks it up without being asked to and says, wow, I see how equity is woven into every one of your policies. So I'll make sure that I get a PDF of our new policies that we've adopted sent around to everybody just for your consideration. And I really appreciate this discussion. I feel like this is really helpful and just gives us all something to think about and honors the work of what REMSL is doing in the spirit of everything. And Chad, I know that you'll be the first to say that you know, you're always thinking about how can we help our special education students? How can we help our BIPOC students? How can we increase that attendance at RIMSL? So I'll turn it over to you, Chad, if you want to add anything. But everybody, I really appreciate all the comments. This, I think, is really helpful.
I think we've had great conversation. We got some touch points to respond to the board with some logistical pieces around numbers and the timeline here. I'll go pull some CASB sample policies to be more informed, and some Colorado BOCES policies from Dale McCall to just check in against that. It sounds like Brianna's going to share some things with the group as well, and we'll bring those things for future dialogue.
And I'll get a PDF of our policy governance things from Scott. Scott's got them all in it. I know you can find them on our board website, but you all know how that goes. It's hard to find all the little pieces. He's downloaded them all and put them in one PDF, and I'll just send it to everybody, and that'll be, or maybe Chad, I'll send it to you, and then when you send out the email with everything, we'll just get one email so we don't get lost in everything.
Great.
So.
Okay, one last thing. I don't know if this is a request for you, Chad, or Carrie, since you've worked on the handbook, but I'm wondering if you can outline the various surveys, audits, whatever they may be that go out community-wise. If you can provide a timeline of how often they occur, and potentially even, like who the audience is, and I don't know if you need to go into like how it's administered, but I think that would be helpful to know, again, like what data y'all are gathering, and how you're putting that together to make sense of what's happening at RIMSL. That would be helpful for me.
That's a really good suggestion. We could add that. I think Chad is the keeper of all of that, but we could add that in the board handbook just so everybody knows like when these surveys go out. And how we use that information. Good suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, Chad, were you going to make one more comment?
No, go ahead.
Final. Okay. So the only other thing that I just wanted everybody to be thinking about for the next meeting is we'll have officer elections by the next meeting. We didn't want to do it today, obviously, because this isn't a voting meeting, and we also don't yet have somebody from Aurora. I'll touch base with Chad on that and how we can do some outreach and figure out who might be interested. I have somebody in mind who might be interested. So I've been in touch with one of their newer board members who might be excited to serve. And then David, maybe you can help us figure out if it's Becky, like if you could get us her email so we can be in touch with her and get planning for the next meeting. So we'll need to vote in a board chair and a treasurer, right? Those are the two officer positions for RIMSL. Yep, Julie's nodding her head. I got that right. I thought those were the two right now. Oh, Julie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say too, that next meeting is the revised budget. So
Yes.
We'll need a quorum, either showing up virtually or in person, however we do it. So.
And we'll hope to be back in person, but Chad, we will definitely rely on you for that call, what feels safe for your building and what, from your perspective, what would work best. Because I know in Denver Public Schools now, if you have more than, I think it's 6 people, you have to have everybody 6 feet apart. And so whatever would work best for you, well, you and I can touch base before the 25th. And if there's anything else, always feel free to reach out to Chad and I. We're happy to help you. And this was a great meeting. Thank you so much for your active participation. I really appreciate it. And Chad and Julie and the whole RIMSL staff, thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
And with that, we will end our meeting for today. Thank you for joining us, those of you who joined virtually, and all of my board colleagues and the RIMSL staff, and Chad especially for getting all of this prepared for us. We appreciate it. And Julie for your heavy lift when you get ready to present to us on the end of January. So thank you.
Great.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.